I want you to imagine 2 yards, same neighborhood, same brutal July heat, same 3 weeks without a single drop of rain. In yard 1, everything is dead. The vegetable garden that took 3 weekends to build, $200 to plant, and hours every week to water and tend, completely gone. Brown, crispy, finished. In yard 2, there is food everywhere. Fruit hanging heavy from branches, pods swelling on vines, leaves thick and green and ready to harvest. The owner has not been out here in 2 weeks, has not watered once. That second yard is not a fantasy. It is not a special climate or a lucky season. It is the result of understanding one principle that most American gardeners never discover, and that the seed industry, the fertilizer industry, and the irrigation equipment industry have zero interest in you figuring out. The plants that feed you best are not the ones that need you most. The plants that build real food security, the ones that produce hundreds of pounds of food per year, decade after decade, are the ones that have evolved over thousands of years to find their own water, build their own soil, and thrive in the exact brutal heat and drought conditions that are becoming normal across more and more of the United States every single summer. Today I am showing you 10 of them. Every single one different from what you've seen on any other drought-proof food plant list. Every one backed by documented yield data and real agricultural science. And the one at number 7 has a root system so extraordinary that scientists spent decades trying to understand how it survives conditions that kill everything around it. Let's get into it. Before we start, drop your state in the comments right now. And tell me honestly, how bad was your drought or heat situation this past summer? Because where you live in America completely changes which of these 10 plants will perform best in your specific yard. I want to see the full map of where my audience is gardening. Before the plants, the science that explains why your conventional vegetable garden keeps failing in heat and drought, and why every plant on today's list is biologically immune to that failure mode. Here is the fundamental problem with annual vegetable crops. Tomatoes, peppers, beans, squash, cucumbers, virtually every common food garden vegetable are annuals. Every single season, they start from zero. Tiny seedling. Fragile root system rarely exceeding 12 to 18 inches of depth, completely dependent on surface soil moisture that evaporates in hours during a heat wave. Research from the University of California, Davis confirms that most common vegetable crops begin experiencing cellular stress at temperatures above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. At 95 degrees, which is a normal summer afternoon across most of the American South and Southwest, tomatoes literally shut down their reproductive systems. They stop setting fruit, they stop producing, and that temperature threshold is being reached more frequently in more American states for longer periods every decade. The plants on today's list operate on a completely different biological strategy. Deep root systems, some documented extending 25 to 40 feet into the earth, accessing groundwater that surface drought cannot affect. CAM and C4 photosynthetic pathways that allow some plants to photosynthesize at temperatures that would kill conventional crops. Evolved drought response mechanisms, including deliberate leaf drop, cellular osmotic adjustment, and specialized root architecture, that have been refined over thousands of years in exactly the harsh conditions that are becoming more common in American gardens. These are not tough plants that merely survive drought. They are plants that evolved for drought, and they produce food abundantly in conditions that kill everything else. Let's meet them. Quick question. Have you ever tried to grow food in your yard during a drought or heat wave and watched it fail? What happened? Tell me in the comments, because I want to understand exactly what conditions people are dealing with. Because the plants I am about to show you were literally designed by evolution for those exact conditions. Starting with number 1, mesquite, Prosopis species. And this tree is the most misunderstood, most undervalued food production plant in the American Southwest, and most homeowners think of it as a nuisance rather than the extraordinary food system it actually is. Here are the documented numbers. Mesquite roots have been recorded extending 175 feet vertically into the earth, the deepest root system of any documented North American plant. While your topsoil is bone dry and cracked at the surface, mesquite is accessing water tables that no drought can touch. The seed pods, produced in extraordinary abundance by mature trees, contain 11 to 17% protein and 23 to 30% sugar by dry weight. Indigenous peoples of the Sonoran Desert ground mesquite pods into a flour that was their primary caloric staple for over 2,000 years. The Tohono O'odham Nation built an entire food culture around mesquite, sustaining populations through droughts that lasted years. A single mature mesquite tree produces 40 to 50 pounds of pods per year. The pods can be dried and ground into flour that is naturally sweet, high in protein, low glycemic index, and gluten-free. Modern nutritional research, published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, confirmed mesquite pod flour's exceptional fiber content and its ability to significantly slow glucose absorption, making it one of the most valuable food crops available for anyone managing blood sugar. USDA Zones 6 through 11. Full sun, zero irrigation after establishment, thrives in alkaline and saline soils that defeat most food plants. Number 2. Wolfberry. Lycium barbarum, also known in the West as goji berry. And the agricultural performance data behind this plant is extraordinary enough that the Chinese government has invested in large-scale wolfberry cultivation programs specifically for arid and semi-arid land reclamation. Here is why wolfberry is on this list. It is documented growing and producing fruit in regions of northwestern China, receiving less than 8 inches of annual rainfall. For reference, the Mojave Desert averages approximately 5 inches. The Chihuahuan Desert averages 9 to 12 inches. Wolfberry grows in those conditions productively. A mature wolfberry shrub produces 2 to 4 pounds of fresh berries per plant per season, with some documented commercial plants producing significantly more. The berries contain 13 grams of protein per 100 grams dried, one of the highest protein contents of any fruit documented in nutritional databases. Beyond protein, wolfberries contain zeaxanthin in concentrations higher than almost any other food, a carotenoid with extensively documented protective effects on macular health. Research published in Optometry and Vision Science documented significant improvements in macular pigment optical density in participants consuming wolfberries regularly over 90 days. The plant fixes its own drought tolerance through deep lateral root systems that access subsoil moisture long after surface conditions appear completely dry. USDA Zones 5 through 9, full sun, well-drained soil, essentially zero care after establishment. Number 3, Natal plum, Carissa macrocarpa, and for anyone gardening in coastal California, Florida, the Gulf Coast, or the lower South, this plant is the food-producing, drought-tolerant perennial you've been searching for your entire gardening life. Natal plum is native to coastal South Africa, which means it evolved for exactly the combination of conditions that defeats most food plants in coastal American climates: salt spray, sandy soil, periodic drought, and intense coastal sun. The fruit, brilliant red, roughly the size of a small plum, contains vitamin C levels comparable to orange juice, and a flavor described as a cross between cranberry and plum. It ripens continuously rather than in a single annual flush, meaning an established plant produces harvestable fruit throughout the growing season. It grows as a dense, thorny shrub reaching 5 to 7 feet, making it simultaneously a security hedge, a windbreak, and a food production plant. The thorns are serious enough to deter human and animal intruders effectively. Published yield documentation from South African agricultural research programs records mature Natal plum plants producing 15 to 20 pounds of fruit per season without irrigation in coastal conditions after a 2-year establishment period. It is also one of the most heat-tolerant fruiting plants documented, maintaining active growth and fruit production at temperatures that shut down most conventional fruit crops. USDA Zones 9 through 11. Full sun to part shade. Salt-tolerant, drought-tolerant after establishment. 3 plants in, and I've already shown you a food plant with 175-foot roots, a drought-producing berry with more protein than most vegetables, and a coastal food security solution that most American gardeners have never encountered. This is the depth this channel brings every single week. Subscribe right now. Free, 2 seconds. Content like this finds you automatically every week from here forward. Number 4, cholla cactus, Cylindropuntia species. And I am including this because it represents the absolute extreme end of drought tolerance. And because most American homeowners have never considered it as a food production plant, despite it being one of the most productive food sources in its native range. Like prickly pear, cholla uses cam photosynthesis, keeping its stomata closed during the heat of the day and opening them at night to absorb CO2 with zero water loss. This mechanism allows active growth at temperatures that cause cellular failure in conventional crops. The flower buds, harvested before they open in spring, have been a dietary staple of O'odham and Apache communities for centuries. They are boiled or roasted and contain significant protein, calcium, and iron. Nutritional analysis published in the Journal of Ethnobiology documented cholla buds' calcium content exceeding that of milk by weight. The fruit, produced after flowering, is edible and sweet, eaten fresh or dried for preservation. Here is the food security dimension that makes cholla genuinely important. In extreme drought years, when every other food source fails, established cholla continues producing. It is the last food standing in conditions of extreme water scarcity. Indigenous communities in the Sonoran Desert maintain cholla patches specifically as famine food reserves. One practical note: cholla requires careful harvesting due to its barbed spines. Tongs and leather gloves are essential. The spines detach easily, a trait that evolved for seed dispersal, not human comfort. USDA Zones 7 through 11. Full sun, dry, well-drained soil, zero irrigation after establishment. Number 5. Honey locust, Gleditsia triacanthos. And this native North American tree is what permaculture designers call a keystone food species. A single plant that produces food, improves soil, provides shade, and supports livestock simultaneously, with essentially zero inputs after establishment. The seed pods of thornless honey locust varieties contain 30 to 37% sugar by dry weight, described by early American settlers as tasting similar to molasses when dried and ground. George Washington specifically cultivated honey locust on his Mount Vernon estate and documented its productivity in his agricultural writings. But here is the performance data that genuinely changes how you think about this tree. The pods contain 12 to 14% protein and are extraordinarily digestible by livestock. Cattle, pigs, goats, and deer all consume them eagerly. Research from the Agroforestry Research Trust in the UK documents honey locust yields reaching 900 to 1,000 pounds of pods per mature tree per year in good conditions. One tree per year. Nearly half a ton of high-sugar, high-protein pods. The tree is also a nitrogen fixer. Its roots work with soil bacteria to draw atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, improving fertility for everything growing nearby. Honey locust handles drought through an extensive lateral root system and a leaf structure that minimizes water loss during heat stress. It is native to the eastern and central United States, meaning it evolved specifically for the conditions found across most of the country. USDA Zones 3 through 9. Full sun. Adaptable to most soil types. Number 6. Tepary bean, Phaseolus acutifolius. And while tepary beans appeared on my protein plant list, their drought tolerance credentials are so extraordinary that they deserve a dedicated place on this list, specifically for their water independence performance. Here is the defining fact about tepary beans. They were developed over 5,000 years of indigenous cultivation in the Sonoran Desert, one of the hottest and driest environments in North America, specifically for maximum production with minimum water. They have been selectively refined by human agricultural practice for 50 centuries to do one thing exceptionally well: produce protein in drought conditions that kill every other bean species. Researchers at the University of Arizona documented tepary bean yields of 1,100 to 2,000 pounds per acre, with irrigation levels representing less than 30% of what conventional bean crops require. In trials with zero supplemental irrigation, relying entirely on monsoon rainfall, some tepary varieties maintained harvestable yields. The seeds contain 23 grams of protein per 100 grams dried. The plants fix nitrogen, improving soil fertility for subsequent crops. They mature in 60 to 80 days, fast enough to fit entirely within the monsoon season window across the American Southwest. And here is the climate dimension that makes tepary beans increasingly critical. As water costs rise and drought frequency increases across the southern United States, tepary beans represent a protein crop that remains viable in conditions that are destroying conventional agriculture. USDA zones 5 through 11. Full sun, lean, well-drained soil, minimal water. We are halfway through this list, and I want to ask you something real. How many of these 6 plants had you heard of before today? And here's the bigger question. If you could replace just one section of your yard with a permanently productive, zero-water food plant, what would you replace and with what? Tell me in the comments. I read everything. Number 7. Moringa oleifera. And I promised you at the beginning that the plant at number 7 had a root system so extraordinary that scientists spent decades trying to understand it. Here's the mechanism. When moringa experiences severe drought, conditions that kill most food plants within days, it does something remarkable. It dies back to the ground entirely. The above-ground structure disappears. If you did not know what you were looking at, you would assume the plant was dead. It is not dead. Underground, a massive tuberous taproot, sometimes reaching the size and weight of a large turnip, is storing water and nutrients in a protected reservoir that surface drought cannot access. When rainfall returns, moringa re-emerges from this root reserve and reaches harvestable size within weeks. This is not folklore. This is documented botanical physiology published in the Journal of Arid Environments, specifically describing moringa's extraordinary drought survival strategy and its ability to re-establish productive growth faster after drought than virtually any other documented food tree. The nutritional data is equally extraordinary. Moringa leaves contain 27 grams of protein per 100 grams dried. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations rates moringa among the most nutrient-dense plants ever systematically studied, containing all 9 essential amino acids plus exceptional levels of iron, calcium, potassium, and vitamin C. A single moringa tree in a productive year provides enough leaf protein to make a significant contribution to the protein requirements of an entire family. USDA zones 9 through 11 as a perennial, zones 7 and 8 with winter protection, container grown in cooler zones. Number 8. Desert willow, Calopsis linearis. And despite its name, this is not a true willow. It is a flowering desert tree in the Bignonia family, native to the American Southwest and northern Mexico, and one of the most spectacularly beautiful food-producing drought-tolerant plants available to American homeowners. Desert willow produces large, orchid-like flowers in pink, purple, and white from spring through fall, attracting hummingbirds, butterflies, and native bees in extraordinary numbers. The flowers are edible, with a sweet, mild flavor used in salads and as a garnish. The seed pods are long, slender, and ornamental, persisting through winter and providing wildlife habitat. But here is the food security value that most people overlook. Desert willow has been used medicinally and nutritionally by Apache, Navajo, and Tohono O'odham communities for centuries. Published ethnobotanical research documents its use as an antifungal, antibacterial, and immune-supporting plant, with laboratory analysis confirming the presence of ursolic acid and other bioactive compounds with documented antimicrobial properties. The tree's drought tolerance is exceptional. It evolved in desert washes where it may receive water only during occasional flash floods, surviving the periods between through an extensive deep root system and significant resistance to cellular water stress. It grows 15 to 25 feet tall, provides shade that reduces ground temperature by 10 to 15 degrees, creating a microclimate that enables other food plants to grow beneath it in conditions they could not otherwise survive. USDA zones 7 through 11, full sun, any well-drained soil, zero irrigation after establishment. Number 9, bunya pine, Araucaria bidwillii. And this ancient Australian conifer produces the most calorie-dense, most protein-rich food of any tree on today's list, in conditions of extended drought that defeat virtually every other food-producing species. The bunya pine produces enormous cones, some weighing up to 22 pounds, containing large seeds with 41% carbohydrate, 9% protein, and significant fat content per 100 grams. The seeds can be eaten raw, roasted, ground into flour, or fermented. Indigenous Australian communities, particularly the Waka Waka people of Queensland, organized major annual gatherings around bunya pine nut harvests. These gatherings involved thousands of people traveling hundreds of miles specifically for bunya nuts, a measure of how nutritionally significant and how reliably productive the trees were. Bunya pines are documented living for over 500 years. They begin producing cones at approximately 15 to 20 years of age and continue producing for centuries after that. Plant a bunya pine today, and you are establishing a food source that your grandchildren and great-grandchildren will still be harvesting. The drought tolerance comes from an extraordinarily deep taproot and a physiological ability to close stomata under water stress while maintaining cellular integrity, allowing the tree to essentially pause and wait out drought without permanent damage. USDA Zones 8 through 11. Full sun. Deep, well-drained soil. Moderate water needs during establishment, essentially drought-tolerant thereafter. And number 10. Perennial grain sorghum. And I saved this for last because it represents what may be the most important development in drought-adapted food production of the last decade, and most American homeowners have no idea it exists. Traditional annual grain sorghum, already one of the most drought-tolerant grain crops in American agriculture, produces a single crop per year from a single planting, then dies. Researchers at the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas have spent decades developing perennial grain sorghum hybrids, varieties that produce grain annually while maintaining living root systems that persist through winter, regrow from the crown in spring, and build increasing drought tolerance with every passing season. Published research from the Land Institute documents perennial sorghum grain yields of 1,500 to 2,500 pounds per acre, comparable to annual grain sorghum, with dramatically reduced water requirements because the deep, established root system accesses subsoil moisture that annual crops cannot reach. Sorghum grain contains 11 grams of protein per 100 grams, comparable to wheat, and is naturally gluten-free. It can be ground into flour, popped like popcorn, fermented into nutritious beverages, or cooked as a whole grain similar to rice or barley. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has been funding perennial grain research specifically because of its implications for food security in an increasingly drought-affected agricultural landscape. When the federal government invests in a food plant, that investment reflects serious assessment of its long-term importance. USDA Zones 5 through 11. Full sun, adaptable to most soil types, drought-tolerant. Before you plant anything from today's list, 3 critical mistakes that will kill even the most drought-tolerant plants before they ever have a chance to prove themselves. Mistake number 1. Treating drought-tolerant as drought-proof in year 1. This is the single most common reason drought-adapted food plants fail in American gardens. Every plant on today's list, without exception, needs consistent deep watering during its establishment period. That period is typically 1 to 2 full growing seasons, while root systems develop to the depth required for genuine drought independence. Plant any of these in full xeriscape conditions with zero irrigation from day 1, and you will lose most of them. Plant them with deep watering every 7 to 14 days during the first 2 seasons. Then progressively reduce irrigation as roots establish, and you will end up with genuinely drought-proof food production for decades. The patience required in years 1 and 2 pays back for 20, 30, 50 years. That trade is extraordinarily favorable. Mistake number 2. Planting in soil with poor drainage. Drought-tolerant plants evolved in conditions where water moves through the soil quickly, not where it pools and sits. Roots sitting in waterlogged soil experience oxygen deprivation and root rot. The same plants that can survive months of drought will die in weeks in waterlogged conditions. Before planting any drought-adapted food plant, test your drainage. Dig a hole 12 inches deep, fill it with water, and time how long complete drainage takes. If it exceeds 1 hour, amend with coarse grit and compost or build raised mounds above the drainage problem. Do this once. It permanently changes what your soil supports. Mistake number 3. Planting too small. Most drought-adapted food plants, trees, shrubs, and large perennials specifically, benefit enormously from being planted at the largest practical size. A larger root ball at planting means faster establishment, faster drought independence, and faster food production. Buying the smallest, cheapest plant to save money up front often means adding 1 to 2 years to your establishment timeline. In long-lived food plants that produce for decades, spending more on plant size at establishment is almost always worth it. That mistakes section, establishment watering, drainage testing, planting size, is the information that determines whether everything I showed you today actually works in your yard or fails in year 1. Your competitor's videos skipped it entirely. This channel never does. If this is the level of practical, honest information you want every single week, subscribe right now and share this video with one person you know who is fighting drought and heat in their yard every summer. They need to see this. 3 questions, and I genuinely want these answers because they shape what I create next. Question 1. Which of these 10 plants are you adding to your yard first? Tell me the plant and your USDA zone, because zone compatibility is everything with drought-adapted food plants, and I want to make sure what you choose actually fits where you garden. Question 2. What is the hottest, driest, most difficult spot in your yard? The place where nothing has ever survived. Describe it in the comments, because I guarantee at least 2 plants from today's list were specifically designed by evolution for exactly that spot. Question 3. And this is the one I really want you to think about. If you had a food plant in your yard that needed 0 water after year 2 and produced for the next 30 years, how would that change your relationship with food, with self-sufficiency, and with your yard? That question is not rhetorical. I want your actual answer. Drop it below. Here is what I want you to carry out of this video. The idea that growing food requires constant watering, constant tending, constant intervention. That idea was not born from botanical science. It was born from the seed industry, the irrigation industry, and the annual vegetable market, all of which benefit from you starting over every single spring. Nature has spent millions of years developing food plants that need none of that. Plants with root systems reaching 175 feet into the earth. Plants that die back in drought and resurrect when rain returns. Plants that produce half a ton of food per year from a single established specimen with 0 inputs. Those plants exist. They are available right now, and most of them cost less than a single season of vegetable garden supplies. The drought is not the problem. The drought is the filter that reveals which plants and which food systems are actually built to last. Plant one thing from today's list this season. Match it to your climate zone. Give it 2 seasons of establishment care, and then step back and watch nature do what it has always done. Feed the people who understand it well enough to work with it instead of against it. If this video showed you a permanent path to food production that does not depend on rainfall, irrigation bills, or weekly maintenance, share it. Send it to one person you know who is fighting drought in their yard, who watches their garden die every July, who has been told that gardening in their climate is just hard. It is not hard. They have been planting the wrong things. Send them this video, like it, subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next one, where we go just as deep on the food plants and systems that build genuine, long-term abundance.